in case someone wants to show up here. And as long as there's less than 10 people, then we're okay to let someone participate here. All right, I think we're all set on everything. Oops. Let's see, get rid of that. All right. All right, I think we're all set on everything. Oops. Let's see, get rid of that. All right. All right, I think we're all set on everything. Yep.
Can anybody hear me? Marty, can you hear me? This is Harold. Can anybody hear me? Okay.
We got some feedback from somebody coming through. Let's just.
Marty, can you hear me? This is Harold.
Yes, I can.
Hey, Harold, I can hear you.
Coming through. Let's just.
Marty, can you hear me? This is Harold.
Hey, Harold, I can hear you.
How's the feedback, Web?
It's not.
I think that's bad feedback. I can't even understand it.
It sounds to me like somebody has it playing through YouTube. Does anybody have YouTube opened at the same time?
It was. That's what it was. I was hooking YouTube up and it was playing it too. And I got it turned off.
Okay.
So we're all ready to go. I think everybody will be able to hear now.
Your dad?
Can you hear me all right, Harold?
Yeah, but I lost the picture. I'll be with you in a second there, I think. I'm going to go out and try to get back in again. Okay, here we are. Can you hear me, Jerry?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, we're doing better here.
Yep.
Okay. We have everybody, everyone?
We're ready.
Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Big Plains Water and Sewer Special Service District on Thursday, April 2nd, 2020. If you'd all stand wherever you happen to be, we'll pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
United States
of America.
And to the republic which it stands.
And to God,
Nation under God, indivisible, with
liberty and
justice for all.
That was a mess.
Well, that is the thought that counts. You still get points, Denny. Roll call. Let's Harold Merritt present. I'm just looking at the top of my screen. And then you can go from there with whoever's there.
Jerry
Rob
Jorgensen.
Gregerson present.
Danny Bass present.
Marty Lisenby present.
Ross?
Ross Gregerson present.
Okay. Going on to the consent agenda. The consent portion of the agenda is approved by one non-debatable motion. If any board member wishes to remove an item from the consent portion of the agenda, that item becomes the first order of business on the regular agenda. So with that, we'll take a look at February expense report and the February operating budget report. Now, I printed mine off, so I have them to look at them, and I don't have any issues with them.
I got a couple questions, if you don't mind, on the operating budget.
Okay,
And one of them is, we overshot our, I guess, professional fees already for the year. Did we do something special and we needed extra professional services? We're almost 113% of our budget.
yeah, that will probably come up more in the budget session part of it that Ben may address, but most of that has gone to engineering, and most of it was mandated by the state.
Okay,
One thing I might just break away here for a second. Dale Harris, are you on?
yeah, he's there. I see his-
Okay. We might ask him to address a few things a little later on relating to that. Well, let me get back through here. Denny, did that answer your question, that was engineering?
One more question. On
Okay.
our impact fees, we're only 36,000. We estimated or budgeted for 234. Did we see a big surge in the last quarter of the year?
Yes, we did. We received some funds from the Gooseberry Preserve Development at the tail end of last year, which helped us over the top. We haven't had any impact fees so far to speak of this year. We have some projects that are promising, but we don't have anything close to our pocket as yet.
So right now, we're just hoping and praying for a big surge in the last quarter.
Pretty much. Summertime is a good time to pick up some impact fees. So spring isn't really that concerning. When you get into the August, September area, if you don't have things pretty close, then that's the time to start stirring around and seeing what we can do to do some more. But until it warms up a little bit and gets into summer, normally we don't do a whole lot.
Okay, now the budget, when we estimated that budget at the beginning of the year, is that because of items we've seen in the future? Or we seen that was on the table that we was hoping was gonna come due?
In my mind, and anybody that would like can join in, but it was just basically following the track record of the past. Nothing had changed much. And so we thought we'd just go with what we had done in the past.
All right,
I can speak a little bit to that. So in our budget, when it was created, we actually named out every single, I think there was only maybe 2 or 3 impact fees that were on the budget that didn't have specific names attached to them. So we knew which project would build up to that 234,000 number, but we also knew that it was a pretty aggressive goal. So we knew that all the cards would have to come into play in order to make that happen. And
Yeah.
It's been a little bit slower this year than anticipated.
Yeah. I can see that because last year we had a $93,000. And so that was very aggressive going to 234.
I might add too that there are a lot of things that have to come together. We have several developers who would be happy to do some things, but they have road access to deal with and some other issues that if they work through those, then they would be able to do something. But at this point, those things come into being. So we're just kind of hoping.
Okay,
Well,
One of
the other issue that pops up on this subject is we have to pass a compliant budget, and that's what it took to get a compliant budget. And, you know, it's probably not realistic that all those were going to come on board, but it made the budget compliant by doing that. And, you know, like it or not, that's how we have to pass it. And so we kind of knew we were going to fall short on this anyway. But it doesn't mean we did it wrong. It just means that we knew we were probably going to fall short a little bit. We were fingers crossed hoping it would all come together, but obviously it's not.
I would rather have a lower budget and beat the budget than have one this high and not even come close to beating it.
But there was, at the time we did this, there was not a lot of room for, in other words, we took actuals and headed that direction. Do you want to handle it, Ben?
Yeah, I think this is actually a good conversation to have right now. With the audit wrapped up for last fiscal year, just like prior years, the district has a negative fund balance. We don't have fully funded bond requirements. And so because of that deficit, the state requires that 5% of prior year revenues be budgeted to make up that deficit. And so in the budget that we'll talk about a little bit later tonight, we still have to, even with an amended budget, we still have to have a compliant budget. And that has to come from either revenue or cutting expenses. And there's just not much more to cut at this point. And so this will come up as we're talking about the budget later tonight. And also as RCAC is wrapping up the rate study. And Matt Kennedy hopefully will be able to present that to us, to the district and the board within the next month. And I think that it's going to shed some light on the financial requirements of the district and where we're at with rates. So that's just something to look forward to. And like the mayor said, it's important to keep in mind that we are required to adopt a budget that makes up for some of the negative fund balance. So.
I like the way Harold Merritt put it one time. He says, it's not like we're all out driving brand new shiny trucks at the expense of the water district. You know, there's not a lot there that can be cut that we haven't already addressed in the last year. So we have what we have.
Good.
Okay, anything else, Denny?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, we'll get back into it here a little bit later. If that's the case, I motion that we accept the consent calendar. Do I have a second?
I second.
A vote?
Aye.
Let's, on these votes like this, let's call out your name and the vote. That way, later on, it's easy to identify who said what. So it'll be, in other words, Jerry Jorgensen, aye.
Okay, Jerry Jorgensen, aye.
Right.
Marty is an aye.
Marty Lisenby, aye.
Danny Bass, aye.
Ross Gregerson, aye.
Harold Merritt, aye. Okay, get everybody on that. Dale, if you're here on the superintendent staff report, could you address what?
Yeah, I'd kind of like to just pick up from what we were talking about as far as the engineering costs for the source protections. That's where that cost came from, and which, of course, with that letter that we got from Michael, hopefully that'll come out of that 59 fund. So maybe we can do some reimbursement there. And then the other thing is that I've had a couple of good conversations with the Gooseberry folks. And their words to me was they want to have heads sleeping on that mesa this fall. I think that we're going to see them probably in the next 30 to 45 days. I think you're going to start seeing some heavy movement from these guys and start really getting a water line out there. I talked to their hydrology, their guy for the pump station. I think we've got everything set for what they need for pressure and kind of where this pump station is going to end up, and just kind of the workings after that. We've talked about some tank size, pipeline sizes and whatnot, but I'm motivating these guys. I shouldn't say motivating these guys, but aiding these guys to get done with their project. But back to the source protection, I just want to remind you guys is we still have the source protection that has to go for and then just so you know that the deficiencies that we got hit with our sanitary survey that have to come with this construction that we got to do. I just did all of the extensions on those, with 8 of them, and I've got those extended until September. I extended those another 6 months. So hopefully we can get that money and get that project rolling and get that source protection taken care of. It's imperative, of course, you guys, with these source protections. This is essentially our watershed and what influences the water that we drink. So it's very important that they're done and that they're done accurately. I just like to throw in, but that's I think that's about all I've got. We got some more sampling that got lessened for us. Some lead and coppers for over in Cedar Point, and then we've got some 6 years now instead of 3-year samples that we can do on the Jessup well. Nitrates, nitrites, the VOCs, and the pesticides are now to 6 years for Jessup instead of being every 3 years. When we took these systems over, all of this sampling was done quarterly. And we build up this trust, so to speak, with having these clean samples to get us to where we're not having to sample as frequently. But unless you guys got any questions, I think that's about all I've got.
Hey, Dale, I got one. Next week sometime when you have a minute, could you get with me and run through the process of the source protection with me so I know what we're talking about?
Most definitely, yes. I'd love to.
Okay, just give me a call when you get time.
Okay.
Hey, Dale, this is Ross.
Yo, Ross.
On our pumping, my concern is we did let the bid to Southwest, and my concern is that we don't have sufficient backup as per state requirements, and I think that we need to try to move ahead on that Cook well. I guess when all this money sorts out, I mean, and maybe in a regular meeting we could go over this, but can you bring us up to speed on that, on our requirements of the pumping and the backup deal?
Well, we've got to have, of course have got to have a redundancy, an emergency plan of what we would do if the 59 well something went wrong with 59, and the worst case scenario, we couldn't get it back online. Right now, we don't have anything. I'll take that back. We have Jessup well to go to, but anybody that lives over to Cedar Point knows that comes out really red. It's a drinkable source. It's a potable water source. Its aesthetics aren't very good whatsoever. We're barely we're meeting our requirements for our flow over there in Cedar Point as it stands with the buildings that we have over there right now. But my biggest concern is the scenario that I just said, is that, for some reason, 59 caved in on us and we couldn't get that thing up and running. We're in that violation of not having that redundancy in our sources. We're kind of in that same spot really with Canaan, because we've lost a spring. We don't have that redundancy over there. That's why both of these projects are extremely important to take care of. So yes, Ross, that's the priority over there. The source protections, of course, they kind of take the priority over that in the state's eyes, of course, but we need to have that redundancy on with the Jessup well. But if we had to rely on the Jessup well, we all know how that went. That's how come we had to hurry and hustle and get 59 going, is because Jessup well that's a borrowed timer also. That's only that's gonna be a GIMP for 3 weeks at the very most in the middle of the summer if we didn't do any conservation whatsoever. So, bring it back up again. Our perfect world, is getting the Cook would be better than the Jessup because of the water quality, but also getting that water mixed in over in Cedar Point would be a huge plus for us for that. But yes, long story short, you're spot on, Ross.
Yeah, okay. And
Hey.
I agree. I think not knowing what the money is there in that 59 account, but I think it should focus on the cook wells, what I think,
I agree with you. The water, I shouldn't say the water quality, the water aesthetics there is a lot better.
Yeah, okay. All right, Dale, thank you.
You betcha.
Okay, anyone else have anything to ask Dale? If not, thank you, Dale.
You bet.
We'll move to discussion and action on item 2, discussion and possible recommendations regarding standby fee collection under 2016 tax assessment Cedar Point Phase 3, lots 1 through 17. Jerry Eves called and said that he would like us to table this for a future date. And so with that in mind, at his request, I motion that we table item number 2. Do I have a second?
I second.
Ross second. Vote by name.
Ross Gregerson, aye.
Jerry Jorgensen, aye.
Marty Lisenby, aye.
Denny Bass, aye.
Harold Merritt, aye. So we'll move on to item number 3, discussion and possible recommendations of policies and procedures to update connection fees and tampering policies. Ben, would you mind, let me find it here.
Yeah, I'd love to. You mind?
Read the first one, 112.
So before we start into the introduction of this item, I would like to mention that on Harold's request, he pointed out a deficiency in the original language that was sent out. So I sent out the first version earlier this week, and late this afternoon, I got out a second version. It basically adds some verbiage to the 1.1.2 section of the Policies and Procedures Manual. And this is the item that we talked about in the board meeting last time, basically where we are shifting the burden, the financial burden, and the responsibility of the excavation of a connection onto the applicant, onto the person who wants the connection. So, Harold, do you think it's most appropriate for me to just read that language as it's drafted?
Well, why don't you read the language and then we can discuss it, especially the latter part that I had added, just since some of the members may not have seen that yet.
Perfect. Okay. And of course, I'm trying to access it, and my computer's just spinning. Okay, there it is. It's open. So the first section, and this one's probably the most important, is to understand the procedures portion of it. So section 1.1.2 would read as follows. Now there's some that's existing language and some that's in addition. It's kind of peppered throughout the section, the changes. So I think it makes the most sense just to read the whole section as it would read now. So there it says, upon approval of the new water connection and payment of the required deposit, the applicant shall engage at their own expense a licensed and insured contractor approved by the water superintendent for the excavation of the water main. The contractor shall schedule this excavation at a time when the water superintendent is available to supervise the excavation. Contractor shall obtain an encroachment permit from the town if required. Upon excavation of the water main, the water superintendent shall then install the service line and required water meter. The actual incurred costs, there's a language there. I would propose that it read, the actual incurred cost by Big Plains of time, materials, and other expenses related to the connection are the responsibility of the applicant. After the installation of the water meter, The contractor shall then replace excavated materials and repair the impacted area to the condition prior to excavation. This includes new road base or asphalt as required by Apple Valley Town. Upon completion of the connection, the district will provide applicant an itemized billing of time, materials, and other costs for the connection, and shall either refund the unused portion of the deposit or bill the applicant for the balance if the deposit is not sufficient to cover the actual costs incurred. Refund of deposit will be mailed within 30 days of completion. If a balance remains, that amount shall be paid within 30 days of completion, or the meter is subject to lockout until payment is in full is received. So basically all this is doing is saying that they are required to contract with somebody that is going to do the excavation and repair the road to the condition prior to that done. And then Dale would still go in and install the service line meter. And then we would estimate, we calculate the actual cost and refund them the difference from the deposit, or bill them for the difference if it actually ended up being more than the deposit, which is unlikely based on how we have it calculated. That would be, there'd probably be some extenuating circumstances that would cause it to go over what we calculated for the deposit. So that's the first section. Harold, do you think it makes sense? Should we discuss that section now, or should we go down into the lower sections at this point?
I'm happy with the first section. If anybody else has any comments on it.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
with that one
I have
edit,
a
you know.
comment.
No, I think the edit changes are great the way you did it, Ben. So.
Go ahead, Jerry.
On this, where you show all this, one of the things I see that's going on is when they connect it and they backfill the trenches, they're not being compacted. So when we go by doing the roads, a lot of times after a rain and stuff, those trenches will sink out of sight. So we have to try to draw material in there to make the roads a little nicer. Is there anything we can put in there that they're required to compact that trench, you know, with it like a 95%, or is that too much?
I think Dale, do you have anything to say about that? I mean, this is kind of your world there. And what could we inspect it and ensure that it's, I mean, the language is already there that says it has to be done to town standards, but
Right.
how do we inspect that?
So that's whatever that's town standard, Jerry, whatever you guys have got in your standards now for compaction is what those folks would have to adhere to. What I would be there for is that after my sand had been put in and that my line had been secured, kind of the town's inspection after that. If we want to talk about that, hey, Dale, okay with the way that got buried, that's up to you guys. But as the district after that, because they came in and got an encroachment from the town. So in theory, anyways, they've made a contact with the town, and the town has already made aware of what their action policies are, is the way that I see it. And if the policies aren't in there, then Jerry's correct. There needs to be something put in there that gives these guys direction of what you actually want them to compact to.
Well, that would be a bit up to the contractor when he comes in and finds out, pays the deposit and so on. He should be informed as to what's expected and then go from there.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah,
That's
Dale,
the way that I see that.
I think that covered in regards to the obtaining the encroachment permit. So once you obtain an encroachment permit, then the policy is outlined for how to bring it back to town standards after you've completed that encroachment. So
Having the verbiage
Yeah, and-
it is in this ordinance is helpful, because if that town, if we change that policy for what the town standards are, then we don't have to come back and change this as well. So having it worded nice. And we could also have, you know, someone comes in for an encroachment permit from Ben, and we could have a pre-printed form that states what we're expecting them to do. And, you know, as far as compaction and inspection or whatever, so.
Good idea.
Yep, that's what I think should happen anyway, that they should have a a guideline to go to, because even when I used to dig them all the time, the city always had what they wanted to go back into place. After the shading was done, then the compaction took place, and it had to be at a certain percent, or your roads will start sinking, especially if we have in asphalt or chip seal. We'll start losing that road into that trench.
Well, just as like the mayor said, if a contractor comes in and pays a fee and gets the encroachment permit, then town standards he should be made aware of town standards, whatever they are at that point, and that's the way it should go back in. And you can change the town standards whenever you feel it's appropriate, and that way you don't have to affect this policy.
Well, it states in the resolution already. It says that the contractor shall replace the estimated materials and repair the impacted area to the condition prior to excavation. Well, isn't that what we need right there?
I think that it should rely on the town's standards, in my opinion. The district is kind of done their part and gone through, and now we've got to be relying on the standards. I like what Marty said, is that the district has got a policy that kind of covers whatever the town wants to do with their policy without us having to put a bunch of language or coming back in. I like what Marty said. I support that.
And they got to go into Ben, and we'll just make sure they have a handout ready. We'll put something together. So along with the encroachment permit, they come in and fill it out, and boom, we hand them a document that says, here's what we're expecting.
There you go.
So we'll double check what we have for town standards on that, and we'll condense it down to a single piece of a handout.
Okay, sounds good. Everybody happy with that one?
Good.
Should we make a motion on it, Harold? This is Ross.
Okay, well, do them separately. Ross, do you want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we approve section 1.1.2, the changes in there as proposed.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, vote by name. Harold,
Ross Gregerson, aye.
Marty Lisenby, aye.
Danny Bass, aye. Up to you, Jerry.
Oh, I thought I did. Jerry Jorgensen, aye.
okay. All right, very good. Ben, could you go ahead with the next one?
Yeah,
And I'd like to get a new copy of that verbiage too, Ben, if you don't mind.
perfect. Yep, I'll get that over to you.
Thank you.
There's also that one, just a typo. I think that's an immaterial correction, so from the language. So the second section is an issue that has come up a few times since I've worked for the town. And this is when somebody goes in and is tampering with the system. So there is some verbiage already in the policies and procedures as far as tampering with the system for the purpose of obtaining water. So stealing water is essentially all that it calls out. So this basically, all this is doing is saying you can't touch district assets. So the language there, and it also puts a penalty associated with it. So this would be in addition to section 11.9. And the language there reads, tampering with the water system in any way will result in a $750 fine for the first offense and $1,500 fine for subsequent offenses, and will result in criminal prosecution. Is considered the unauthorized manipulation or change of any water apparatus or related equipment in any fashion. All water-related equipment is considered the property of the Big Plains Special Service District.
Okay, any comments on that?
Well, this is Ross. Is this all equipment in front of the meter?
It's anything to do with the district's equipment, which means from the can into the district's side. So technically you're not supposed to, from the Terrorist Act, you're not even supposed to be in those meter cans. That's actually considered tampering with a public water system. So yes, Ross, meter box out to the system, well buildings, anything like that. Just what kind of got Ben and I finally to just kind of say we need to put something in this is I had a character call Ben and say, hey, let Dale know that I went down to Schultz's and installed a water meter and I have service now on the property. He felt completely entitled to do that.
Oh my.
And so this is gonna rectify that.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, that's
I
a
do wonder if
easy
part
way
of
to
the
get it done.
That's ballsy.
Yeah.
I wonder if we should include language a little bit more specific as to what district assets are. So just defining exactly like Dale said, what the system assets that we're talking about here are.
Yeah, but anybody tampering with the water supply in any county, any city or town may be considered a terrorist act under the Homeland Security rules and regulations. So
Correct, but it gets into crazy language. So when this happened, that's what I did is consulted that. And
Okay.
he didn't meet the criteria for what he'd actually done, because what you're talking about is actually $100,000 fine and 18 years in a federal penitentiary. It's a huge deal for someone to be in our system. Travis didn't quite make that, but he definitely crossed he got into the hot side of a communal water system. Yeah, like Grandpa said, he needs to be switched on that guy. That was insane. So you're spot on, Denny. But we just can't hit him with that. So we kind of have a middle ground in there. We have to handle inside our own camp, so to speak.
Any more
Well,
comments?
this is Ross. I think we need to define that just a little more, though, that whether it's from the meter, the main line to the meter or something where it's defined rather than just all related equipment.
The average person
Any
might
ideas
talk about the
on the
backhoe.
very,
I agree with Ross. I just think that if you define that, that, and most people don't know that they can't get into that meter box as well. And, having that spelled out, I think would be helpful as well. So I'd like to see that language polished up a little bit. And
Well, if you put tampering with any portion of the water system, being the meter, the pipes, the valves, or anything, it should cover it all. We need to cover everything in there, including the equipment.
Well, should we let this one go for now and work on it and bring it up in the next meeting? Fill it out a little more, have Dale and Ben
Water leaking.
work on it?
well, if somebody has the language, we could do a motion, including the language we want to see in there, and just pass it with that language being added as well. That's another option.
You don't turn it off.
Okay, Dale, what would you like to see in it?
I'm sitting here reading this tampering is considered unauthorized manipulation or change of any water apparatus or related equipment in any fashion. All water-related equipment is considered the property of Big Plains Special Service District. I think that word related needs to put in, because that's going to elude people of what is that relating to. So something, Ben, to the effect, because I do agree here, that something to the effect that says meter box out, basically meter box to the public side, anything on the public side, so curb to public, something like that, because 10 inches off of that meter, of course, going into everybody's yard, turns into that private system. So I don't think we need to get technical with a bunch of different verbiage in there naming a bunch of things. I think we just need to start that line maybe at the can, but I just can't think of actual wordage to stick in there. But I think the related might lead people astray. Well, what is actually related to it? Can I touch the valve that we put in for people so they weren't getting into those meter cans? So help me, Ben.
Just
Dale, this is Ross. Could we say something like all water-related equipment prior to and including the meter is considered the
That sounds-
property of big?
I like that.
Well, we could say the meter and the meter box.
Is considered property of Big Plains. I like putting that as considered. Lets, I think, everybody know. I like that part of that, Ross.
Yeah, why don't we
Okay.
look at tampering with any portion of the water system? Because that includes everything. So tampering with any
Yeah,
portion of the water system in any way.
Well, I agree with Ross and Marty, Denny, just because the sense is that we're going to get a whole bunch of questions if we don't give an actual line, in my opinion, that I understand what you're saying, and everybody that's talking right now understands. I'm just trying to catch the people that are going to ask a whole bunch of questions, so to speak, if there's not a line drawn there. So I feel like that the meter can somehow has got to be included. I kind of feel like it's a no-brainer, of course, for our well buildings and all of that, because that's where that federal law is going to kick in.
Yeah, let's define it like we have it, all related equipment, including, and just define at least the verbiage as far as the meter and the meter can, if that's what you want to call it. You know, so it's defined, because most people aren't going to be out there digging up your pipe and drilling holes in it and do
Right.
anything nefarious. It's going to be the meter itself that they think they can go in there and just turn it on or off, or tamper with the, you know, wiring or anything else that might be inside that. And so just, I think identifying the meter and the meter base, or can, however you want to define it, we can just have Ben add that language to it. And I would just make a motion that we approve the language with the change that we, instead of just saying related equipment, we include the words including the meter and the meter base or can.
I like that. I think of what he's got there and putting just what you just said, Marty, including the meter can and meter itself. And I think that would cover us. I like that.
All right, well, I just made that motion, so we just have to second it and Ben can change it and it's done.
I'll second it, Harold Merritt,
And
and call for a vote by name.
Artie Lisbon,
Ross
aye.
Gregerson, aye.
Denny Bass, aye.
Jerry Jorgensen, aye.
Marty, you did vote, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Okay, yeah, I voted. So, Ross, yeah, you did. Okay, everybody voted. That's a done deal on the tampering. Going on down the agenda on number 5, discussion of possible action on bulk water meter billing and in road repairs. Richard Fisher,
Harold, may I interrupt?
yes.
If we could just get a quick discussion, since we split these out, there were 3 separate categories on the policies and procedures. There was also the section Appendix A-1, which established the deposit
Oh, okay.
on meter size. So if that shouldn't take much discussion, but if we could just get a motion and an approval on that.
Okay, I'm gonna get the right page here again.
It's on your screen now.
Hey, we discussed anywhere from $1,600 to $2,400 or $2,500 deposit for a 3/4 inch connection. I see here $1,600. I can't see us going over $1,600 if our responsibility is tapping the main line, putting a pipe in and a meter and a can. And that, if we do go over, that's addressed in the policy we just passed. So any discussion on it?
Just as a reminder, that $1,600 value for the 3/4 inch, that included some of the excavation work. And so that was one of the older calculations. So we're definitely covered as far as costs go. So just as a side note there, it should be well over what the actual cost will be.
Correct, yes.
Well, I make a
And-
motion that we approve Appendix A-1 on the connection fee deposit by meter size.
I'll second that.
Vote, Harold, yes.
Marty Lisenby, aye.
Denny
Jerry
Belcher,
Jorgensen,
Gregerson, aye.
Jerry Jorgensen, aye.
Okay, I think we have everyone. Okay, we ready to move on? Ben, did we get all that?
Yeah, we did. Thank you.
Okay, and then the part that Richard Fisher wanted to address, since he's not here or on the phone that I'm aware of,
He's not.
we'll just pass that for now. So we get down to item 6, and that's then your part of the world. Ben, do you want to take that?
Yeah, because this is an increase. It's actually in the end, it's actually a decrease in the overall budgeted value, and I'll provide some background on that. Actually, maybe this is an explanation prior to public hearing, so I will go ahead and explain the reason for this budget amendment. So this is a formal amendment, and we'll move into a public hearing of the meeting. So I mentioned earlier in the meeting that with a negative fund balance, with an unfunded bond reserve, the state requires a 5% allocation of prior year revenue to make up that deficit in the budget. And when I calculated that last year for the budget, I incorrectly calculated water sales only. So I excluded some of the other income that the district receives. And so this budget does two things. So that's the first thing that it addresses. And the second item that it addresses is the allocation of the Well 59 funds. So as you guys know, the district has just over $42,000 eligible, available for spending on the balance sheet. So this is money that the district has that it has already recognized as revenue. And what we need to do in order to expend those funds, we need to bring that into the income statement and the budget year, especially because we're going to be, it's proposed that we use that for engineering costs. Engineering costs cannot be capitalized, so they must flow through the income statement. And so the budget as it's outlined is it draws down quite a few expense categories in order to increase the professional services expense for this year. And basically what that would do, it would enable the district to use funds, at least what the district has been invoiced for the source protection plan, because those weren't budgeted for when we went through the budget cycle this time. So with that said, I think first thing to do would probably be to open for public comment, and then the district can get in, or the board can get into the discussion on the budget.
Do we have any public comment? I don't know if anybody's out there to represent the public.
On the bottom of your screen, just for everybody, it says manage participants. And if you click on that, it'll always give you a sideline view of who's on. And right now, everybody, I don't know which view you guys are in, but we have 8 people on this call. And so everybody can be seen and heard right now. Looks like we lost Dale somewhere.
Okay, does anybody who is viewing or participating have anything they'd like to add to this, or any questions?
I do. So we had $42,000 in the fund, and we're going to allocate roughly $20,000 for engineering. And so that only leaves us $22,000 to do $42,000 worth of repairs. And Ross said that the award's already gone to Southwest. And so where's the other $22,000 coming from, guys?
Basically, Southwest was or will be broken out into several pieces, and we'll just have to work with the budget that we have. The main focus will be the cook well, since that's the best one to start on. Ross and Dale know more about it than I do as far as the mechanics of it, but that would be the focus of the 20,000 that's left. The 20,000 that goes into engineering, and Dale might be better to explain the well source protection, but that well source protection was outlined a little bit in the letter that Michael Grange sent, I think it was this morning or last night, in that the protection zone not only had to do well 59, but it had to include the Jessup well and the Cook well, since when they were in operation, they interacted with each other. So if we turned on the Jessup well, it was taking water that may well come out of the 59 well. So the protection area had to be large enough to cover all three instead of just the 59 well, which was titled for the inspection, or I mean the protection area. One of the things that happened, I know Debbie Kopp and her husband Rich received a letter, a certified letter that was we were required to send out explaining what you could do in certain areas and certain distances from the wells, the surveys that have to take place. And Dale, are you still on?
He's not.
You're not? Anyway, that was the reason that the protection zone cost went higher than we had anticipated, as the state had us not only do 59, but Cook and Jessup, and that was a state mandated effort. And so Rod, having done 59 or being in the middle of it, went ahead and did 3. So we have 3 well protection area studies wrapped up in that funding.
Could there have been some grants we could have gotten for engineering?
That is all grant. I might add too that the only reason there's any money left in that account is that Ross, myself, and Dale installed the pipe and the well 59 and so on, instead of contracting it out. So we did that in-house, knowing that we'd need that money for the Jessup well and Cook well and some other things. So we even put in the electrical mast and the meters and everything. So when the power company came, all they had to do was pull the wire. So we saved what we feel was that $42,000 that would have gone out. And we didn't know exactly how it would be spent, but we felt that it would all be spent on those 3 wells in some fashion. So again, it's an in-house effort through the board to provide the labor to hang on to that money. So that's all we could keep through our own sweat. And then the state mandated the protection area, and there went that chunk. So we're going to have to rethink it and probably rebid part of the Cook well, but we're going to have what's left after this and then go with it.
Yeah. Harold, can I talk on this, to this question? Yeah, so when we bid out, thinking we had the 40,000, when we bid that out, we bid it out in segments, knowing that we, as the SSD wanted to do sweat equity, again on those two pump houses. So when the bids came back, they are bid by different sections. And so we've already awarded the bid, but we don't have to award the whole bid. And the bidders were also notified of that fact, that we probably, as a SSD, we're going to do that above ground pump plumbing in the pump houses and all that stuff. So we didn't know that the state was going to mandate this well protection site, but even so, with the 22,000 left, we need to look at our numbers and stuff, but I still think we're at least in good shape for getting the Cook well on. The Jessup well is operating now, and so that would get the Cook well back online, which is inoperative at this time and upgraded, even with that 22,000. So it's just something we need to discuss as a board, but we didn't know about this well protection stuff raising its head.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to dig into a little more. Tish brought up a point about grant money. I know the money that's left over in the 59 now, some of it might be grant, but isn't some of it also money we borrowed? And
50-50.
And we had, sorry, Ben?
It's 50-50.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I was just thinking that, I loved Ross's idea of trying to improve these wells, the direction we're heading. And then when we change directions on this, I don't know that we ever paused long enough to say, well, the state's mandating this. Is there any state money available for just the source protection? Because they're asking us to do this. We're, paupers out here when it comes to our budget and our ability to pay some of this stuff. And I'm wondering if there is any additional grant money that's available to help us pay for that. And then we only have, say 10,000 out of our pocket, and we got a grant for another 10,000 to do what they're mandating that we do. And I don't know that we've looked into that or not. And that would then give Ross another $10,000 to play with when it comes to doing these well improvements that he's talking about. And, once we spend that money and we just pay for the source protection, that money's out the window, and we can't go back and say, oh, by the way, we need a grant for source protection that we've already written a check for. So does it make any sense that maybe there could be some grant money through some source for that source protection, whether in full or even in part? Because even if we got only half of it, it would be better than writing the whole 20,000 out of our account.
Well, you have that's certainly a valid point that since they pulled that one out and handed it to us without any help other than do it, that they might have some funds to help us do it, especially in the circumstances we're in. So the short story is no, I haven't personally talked to anybody about grant money for a source protection, but I'll and hopefully we can come up with something or some route we can handle that in a different fashion.
The other issue I have with this source protection is just that we have not seen any kind of paperwork as far as here's what the plan is and how much the breakdown is that gives us as a board something to vote on that says, yeah, let's spend 20 grand on source protection. I get that we have to, I get that we need to, but it just seemed like there was never anything brought up or voted on by the board that we were explained it. We were told that we needed to, but at no point did we just raise our hand and say, yeah, let's spend 20 grand. And it just seemed like we would want to do that at some point with a better understanding of the 20 grand. And I get it, that's probably a bargain, because we're getting 3 of them done and all that. But I just think we're missing those 2 components where we didn't ever vote on it, and we didn't see if there was any grant money that might even reimburse us 100% of this. And worst case scenario, maybe even hopefully half of it at least. And then that would give us that money to do what Ross wants to do on the wells as well.
Yeah,
Can I comment?
sure.
Yeah. I believe that we did vote on this, but the number, we didn't know there was gonna be, 3 areas for the protection site. I believe if we look in the minutes that we did bring this before the board, we just didn't know it was gonna be, 20,000. I think we were talking, and maybe you can remember, Harold, maybe 20 or not 20, but maybe 10 or something that we had an estimate, I believe.
And that could be, Ross. I could have forgot that we voted on it. And some of these things, they come up and they make sense and you say yes on them. And, you know, anyway, I just wanted to throw it out there that did we vote on it? And then did we, any possibility of getting some type of grant money that might help us out? So, and if the answer is no on both, or yes, that we voted on it, and no, we didn't, there is no grant money, then, you know, we're where we're at. But it'd sure be awesome to be able to have someone else write a check, and that gives you money to help out with those well improvements that you wanted to do.
Yeah,
So,
we'll
I-
pursue that.
let's ask the question anyway. I just think it's worth asking. I mean, you don't know what Division of Drinking Water or some other, you know, there could be someone out there that's got some money to hand out, you know, and we won't find out if we don't ask.
Okay, well, we'll ask.
I think I'd like to make one other point on this budget as it's outlined. I said that I drew down some of the categories. This makes everything really tight for the rest of the year. To the extent that it's pretty concerning as far as system maintenance, well maintenance. I mean, the truck repairs, you name it. It's really tight at this point. In addition to that, professional services, the only thing that I increased here is what has already been invoiced. So what Rod has invoiced already for protection, as well as the current as-built, that's the only thing on there. We wouldn't be able to cut another check to Rod outside of what's already been invoiced. So I think it's important that the board just understands that as we have this budget discussion.
How does that $40,000 play into this? If so the well people come in and we only spend 10 of the 20, we get everything accomplished we want to. Is that 10 in that PTIF account available to be pulled into the general budget somehow?
Yeah, it's important to understand the difference between a capital asset, a capitalized asset, and an expense. So these studies that we're doing, they have to go through the income statement. Whereas if we had spent all $42,000, that's a capital improvement and doesn't flow through the income statement. And so it's important to understand that that money, the 22,000, it doesn't have to flow through the income statement in full accrual accounting, which is what the board or what the district does. So
Okay. All right. So what do we need to do from here, Ben?
that's I mean, I guess the next step would probably be closing public comments. And then from there, it's a discussion of the board as to whether or not to approve the budget is proposed. And if you do, that's essentially authorizing the work that Rod has invoiced for the source protection plans. I think that's probably the next step on it.
Okay, is there anyone in public comment that would like to say anything at this point? If not, I'd entertain a motion to close the public comment section.
Yeah, you can do it as chairman. You don't need a motion or vote on it to
Okay.
open or close public comments.
All right, I make the motion that we close public comment and move on to The board discussion as to accepting the budget as outlined by Ben. Any board members have anything to say about what we've discussed? If not, then Ben, do I make a motion that we accept the budget as you have outlined?
Shall we, I don't even know that we've seen the budget, other than our packet here. Do you want to share screen, Ben? Is there anything you want to show us that where you've changed things, or?
Sure. Yeah, let's talk specifics. I think that's important to understand how we're drawing down this.
Do you have it on your screen?
I do.
All right. I'm going to make you host.
It's a lot of power for me.
There you go. It's all yours.
So there's no changes to any revenue categories. So all the proposed changes occurred down here in the expenses. So basically, I mean, there's a few minor categories that are lower than we're just simply lower than anticipated. Public postings are lower. Travel and fuel has been a little lower. We had to increase some of our expenses for general office supplies because that's coming a little higher than anticipated. This is the big one. This is where we're increasing the budgeted engineering professional services from $5,000 to $18,000.
And this money is transferred just from other line items, or does some of this come from that well 59?
Well, the money will be reimbursed from the well 59, but it's not recognized as income.
Okay.
So I don't need to get, I'm trying not to get too accounting nerdy on us here. But in a full accounting, the district can run on a loss in any given year if we had a positive fund balance. If it was fully funded, it's okay for in full accrual accounting to run at a loss. So that's why engineering can flow through the income statement. Our audit costs are a little bit higher than anticipated. So those had to be increased for $7,000. Our legal fees is one of the big ones where we're able to draw from. We had budgeted $10,000 in legal fees, and I believe it was through the end of January, we have been invoiced for $800. And I just essentially anticipated another one of those invoices through the end of the year. And again, the rest of these are pretty tight. So system maintenance and repairs, we originally budgeted $7,000. We've spent $2,300 year to date, and we drew down that budget to $3,000. System equipment, we budgeted $9,000. Have spent just under $4,000 year to date, drawing that down to $4,700. Same thing with maintenance and repairs, but originally budgeted $2,500, drawing that down to $1,900. We had to increase equipment maintenance. This was primarily related to the truck. We originally budgeted $3,000 for that. We're increasing that to $4,500. Equipment fuel, I increased the budget kind of in anticipation of summer work, but now that fuel prices are dropping so much, that might actually not be a problem. And utilities, I did some rough math. I only added a few $100s to utilities, but that's looking like it could come in slightly over depending on how moist this spring is. So down at the bottom here, we have the budgeted fund deficit makeup. So you'll see that originally budgeted, we budgeted $287,000 in operating expenses, but for the budget proposal, we had to draw that down to $282,000 in order to have a compliant budget as required by last year's fiscal year, last year's audit. And so this is just a quick calculation showing how much we have to make up, and that we're, this gets us within $2. So we're $2 over a compliant budget. So this is a legal budget by the state's requirements. But like was discussed earlier in the meeting, we still have about $200,000 in impact fees to collect in order for it to be a realistic budget. So, any questions on the budget while I'm sharing the screen here?
No, thanks for your explanation.
Oh, appreciate it.
All right, I make a motion that we go ahead and approve the budget. I would still like to see that we're trying to see if there's any fund, out there that might give us a grant to help us help pay for this. As you go over the numbers, we can see that, things are really tight, and it sure be nice to see if we can find some agency that's willing to write us a check for 20 grand to help pay Rod's bills on this source protection. But I'd like to see us at least that we tried, but I recommend that we approve the budget as is, these amendments.
I second the recommendation, but we got to be super careful the next 3 months. So you got to really watch our pennies.
Okay, I vote.
Ross Gregerson, aye.
Marty Lisenby, aye.
Jerry Jorgensen, aye.
Danny Bass, aye.
Harold Merritt, aye. Okay, thank you. Okay, I guess that finished item number 7 as well, didn't it, Ben?
It did. Yep.
Okay. All right, anybody else? Anybody have anything they'd like to comment on before we adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
I'm
I second it.
Ross Gregerson, second.
Okay.
Marty Lisenby, aye.
Jerry Jorgensen, aye.
Danny
Harold
Bass,
Merritt,
aye.
aye.
Ross Gregerson, aye.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.